Go for it.
Okay. All right. So bonjour, everybody, and welcome back to the Indigenous Comics Symposium. We're very happy that you've decided to join this ragtag group of people, mostly nerds, who have been bantering for minutes before you came on. And this is going to be a really fun panel for the most part because most of us know each other very well and we're able to tease and talk about one another, and as well as the people that aren't here as well. And this is the special finishing of our day, the completion of our day, this panel on this place and 150 Years Retold. And we're going to talk about that book in just a minute, and we're going to hear a little bit from the publisher before we begin our night session. But before we begin tonight, we want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Treaty 1 territory, which is the homeland of the Lakota, Dakota, the Nakota, the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Dene peoples, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. And we ask each one of you to think about your territory that you're on right now and the relationships that you share with people in that territory, the stewards and the caretakers of those lands, and think about your roles and responsibilities as a result of being a part of those relationships. We ask you all just to think about that for a moment and take a moment to think about it. And as we do that, we're going to finish off our day. We've had an amazing day at the Indigenous Comics Symposium. I'm very honored to be joined right now by my fellow co-organizers, Sean Carlton, who's going to wave to you from way over there. He's assistant professor with me in the Department of Native Studies at the University of Manitoba. My other co-organizer is Kateri Ekawenzi-Dem, who is my colleague, assistant professor, and a good friend of mine from the University of Toronto Scarborough Department of English. And I can't quite see Kateri, so I assume you're waving right now. There you are. There you are. Perfect. And yeah, I've only can fit so many on my screen because I've got the shared screen. So, and then of course our good friend Lucas Tromley from the University of Manitoba Institute for the Humanities, who did a fantastic job chairing the final panel we just finished a couple hours ago on indigenizing Marvel comics, which was an outstanding panel. And we're going to, get that uploaded. I'm not sure if it's already uploaded on the Facebook page or not, but I see Sean nodding, so I assume it's there. And tonight, we wanted to end off our panel by talking about this book, which recently won the Manitoba Book of the Year, and I believe is the first graphic novel to ever win that award for the entire province of Manitoba and all of the books it's published in the award year of 2020. This book is a remarkable feat. It's a remarkable accomplishment that has involved so many different contributors, and we want to give a special kudos to Laura Mckay, who was one of the lead editors. She was the person that really shepherded this book from beginning to end, and we really want to give her a big appreciation for all the emails and messages, as well as her other team members to put this book together. And particularly the publisher of Highwater Press / Portage and Main Press. I think some people get confused on what that is, but Portage and Main Press is the parent of Highwater Press. Highwater Press is the fiction imprint, but we're very honored tonight to have with us the publisher of this book and the company that brought us to this book, Catherine Gerbasi. Kathy. I don't think I've ever called you Kathy or Catherine, but it's a real honor to have you here tonight. Thank you much for coming.
Thank you. And thank you, Nigan and Kateri, for inviting Highwater Press to take part in this fantastic event. As the publisher of Highwater Press, it's a privilege to be publishing the work of so many of the creators we heard from today and will be hearing from shortly. So welcome, everyone. I was asked to introduce this place, which was a challenge, how to introduce a work that has become, in a short time, an iconic text about Indigenous history, and that was written with the intent to provide a counter-narrative to the celebration of Canada 150. What was imagined to be in 2017 a somewhat radical and irreverent idea, given the celebrations going on, in fact, turned out to be one of the most popular mainstream books in Canada upon publication. And the momentum has not stopped. So excuse me while I brag for a moment about this book. This place will soon be a CBC podcast produced by Tara Mora, Jackie Black, and hosted by Rosanna Deerchild. This place will soon be translated into German by Baho Books in time for the International Frankfurt Book Fair, where Canada is the country of honor. This place was selected by the University of Winnipeg to be the One Book, One UW, selected, selected so that every student could have the opportunity to read the book. And thank you to Candida Rifkin for your support always. This place is taught in high schools and universities across Canada. There is a teacher guide, a fantastic teacher guide created by Christine Malott. The anthology has won awards, as Nigan mentioned, critical acclaim, it's received critical acclaim, and it's on the best lists of everywhere, which is what every publisher dreams of. What is it, though, about this anthology that moves us so in a way that great literature does, that feels new, that feels right, like it's satisfying a hunger, that makes you angry, joyful, hopeful, that makes you grieve, that takes you to a future that is a love letter to the present? What moves me about this place is the powerful impact of the truth of the stories, of the accumulative effect of the heroic and extraordinary acts done by ordinary people throughout this time together. It just blows me away. Truly, what moves me is the respect and love for the people and communities that held these stories so that they could be told today by the brilliant storytellers and artists who interpreted these stories and events in their own way for this anthology. So to the This Place creators, thank you for trusting Highwater Press with your work, your stories, your art, and thank you from all of us for giving us this gift. Thank you.
Kathy, you really did an amazing job encapsulating the text. And you were the person who said, oh, I don't want to talk. And
I don't like talking.
I know you don't. But what a remarkable, I was actually choking up thinking like how, I haven't really thought about the, because when you're in the middle of all of this, you don't often think about the impact of the text. And when you line it all up like that, including something I knew I heard, which was the translation to German, is just a remarkable, exciting moment. I mean, I was part of the very early conversations around this book. And in fact, we were talking about the names for almost like, what do we name this book? And I kept saying, well, let's talk about this place. And when I'm talking about this place, we're talking about, retelling Canada during this really maple syrupy sweetness sickness that was going on around this nationalist fervor, completely leaving Indigenous peoples out of the equation. And we were talking about it at the publication, and I said, we need to talk about this place. And you were like, that's the title. And I remember that moment, and I remember the moment in which we started talking about the collaborators and different people who we all have brought in now, and people who are here tonight, and people who are also elsewhere and thinking about us tonight on this incredible achievement. And so I don't want to take up too much more time, but it is to say that I owe my participation and my participation with Highwater Press so much, because Highwater Press has believed in Indigenous literature from the days of early publications of David Robertson and publishing, Kegedonce Dam and all the different people that we've included, many of whom are part of this anthology. But, the very first person to get me to believe that I could do a comic book is on this book as well. And his name's Gregory, but GMB Kamichak, who is just a remarkable, wonderful, giving person who is an educator and a thinker. And he's always been a huge supporter of mine. And so he gets an extra support. I'd never be able to have done this work unless somebody had said, you could do this, and sat me down and showed me how to make a comic book. And so GMB Kamichak's just, I'm so glad he's a part of this project as well. So many people have been, built this project from the ground up, and we could not think of someone better to host tonight than Candida Rifkind, who is a scholar, an activist, a big supporter of graphic novels, but particularly Indigenous graphic novels, having put together, I think, the only annotated bibliography on Indigenous graphic novels on Turtle Island, or maybe there's another one out there that I don't know about, but particularly has been so dedicated to the field of Indigenous graphic novels, took this place and offered it to every student at the University of Winnipeg, and did a massive celebration of this text just before the pandemic, the year before the pandemic. And I think back to that time and go, what a remarkable achievement, all of these panels and people purchasing the book and supporting the book, and of course that wonderful teacher's guide by Christine Emlott. And so I want to hand it over to our host for the evening is Candida Rifkind. Candida?
Thank you so much, Nigan. That was very generous. None of those projects happened alone. I had collaborators and co-organizers for all of them. I won't shout them out now, but you know, everything we do together. So I really appreciate that. And I want to shout out to Highwater too, because they make it possible for me to teach Indigenous comics at the University of Winnipeg and do incredible extra resources as well that my students really appreciate. So I'll just briefly introduce myself. I'm Candida Rifkind. I'm a professor in English at the University of Winnipeg here in Treaty 1, and I teach courses in comics and Canadian literature and culture and Indigenous comics. And I'm just really honored to be invited by the organizers to moderate tonight. I want to thank you so much for including me. It was a great day. I had to go in and out because, you know, teaching, but the panels I saw were just phenomenal. And I think this is the beginning of a really important and ongoing conversation that's just going to grow. I'm really excited about tonight because we have, I believe, 9 contributors to this place, and you have the table of contents up there. It might be a bit small to read, but what we're going to do is invite the contributors to speak to their chapters. They've been asked to speak, I think, 5 to 7 minutes. I don't have any kind of like gavel or like vaudeville hook to pull you off the stage, but I might wave violently or get Sean to mute you if you're going on and on. But I just invite you to speak to your chapter and tell us a bit about it and the process you went through it. I'll ask you to introduce yourselves very briefly. And just in terms of the order, I thought we could go by chapter, sort of in the order they are in the book. And one of the really important things about this place for me is that so many of the chapters are collaborative. So there are 2 of you here tonight who both worked on the chapter. I really hope that you'll both speak to it and tell us a bit about that process. So that's the order I'd like to go in. Is Sunny Asu would be up first, and Kyle Charles talking about Tilted Ground.
Sunny,
so
I'm
yeah?
sorry to interrupt you there. Sunny just messaged me to say that he's taking his kids, he's driving his kids, but he will be coming late. So if we, I realized that, you know, Sunny, you put Sunny first, but Sunny is.
I can see him. Or is that his, yeah,
Oh,
I thought I was, did you put out like a cardboard cutout?
No, you're thinking of somebody else. I'm good.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll just go chapter by chapter. Please introduce yourselves. And I pulled out your title pages and a couple of representative, somewhat random pages, just so people can see the book. But if you have your own slides, let me know and I'll take mine down. So
Cool.
Go ahead, Sunny and Kyle.
Right on. First off, nice to meet you, Kyle, for the first time in somewhat person. I've never met you before, so it's good to see your face. Yeah. So I'm coming to you from Untouched territory, the home territory of my family and my people. I'm currently living on the Weewakam First Nation, the First Nation of my grandmother, but I come from the Mckay First Nation, the First Nation of my grandfather. And I was telling the story of my great-great-grandfather, Chief Billy Asu. That's basically it. I don't know. Just kidding. What I found fun about doing this project was I'm a giant comic book nerd, and I got my start as an artist, not by drawing or developing comics, but riffing on them and using them through my work to develop my practice and develop my career. So when I was approached by Highwater to consider writing something for this anthology, I was excited and nervous at the same time. I had never written a graphic novel script before. I basically just wrote a story about my great-great-grandfather, Chief Billy Asu, handed it in, and they shot me back in script format, and then I kind of went back and forth from there to develop the story. And it's basically a story about Chief Phileas Sioux and his time as the chief and as a chief of the Weewakam First Nation, and how he survived through the Potlatch Ban, which lasted in Canada from 1884 to 1951, and how his mode of working within the colonial construct that was being imposed on us was adoption as opposed to absorption. And the biggest thing for me in the story was focusing on his daily ritual, which was told to me by my grandmother and one of my uncles, where he would go down to the beach every morning and just dunk in the ocean and have a good swim and come back out. And that's how the story kind of starts. And the story is called Tilted Ground because Saqualutin was the name of our original village on Quadra Island, and it means tilted grounds. So I was really thrilled to be working with Kyle and Scott on this story, and I was really thrilled and happy with the artwork that Kyle produced for it. Really beautiful, really amazing. I think he was able to capture pretty much, everything I could have imagined through this story and how it came out to be. So that maybe I'll pass it on to Kyle to talk about the artwork he developed for it.
Yeah, I'm Kyle Charles. I'm a Edmonton-born illustrator. I've worked for Marvel, DC, Image, Heavy Metal, as well as a bunch of other kind of, commercial companies. But yeah, I'm Cree, band member from the Whitefish First Nations here in Alberta. And yeah, I can't actually remember how I got offered to go on this book and provide some artwork, but I do remember just feeling very proud of the fact that I was invited. And it was definitely at a time in my career where I was really sick of mainstream comics, and just wanted to start doing more Indigenous content, and was fortunate enough to be offered such a touching story, and one that was so personal. I mean, when you're reading the script and you see the name and they share the name of the writer, it's like, okay, wow, this is actual family. So yeah, it was great jumping on the book. The artwork, I just really tried to keep it simple, loose, just trying to capture the essence of the people's feelings through over exaggerated kind of expressions, and talk with Scott Ford, who did an amazing job on the colors. Just briefly about keeping this more kind of old school, but like in approach, but having the colors really jump off the page. That the color should be something that should just leap right at the viewer. So yeah, it was a joy to work with both Sonny and Scott, and the final result is something I'm very proud of. And to sit amongst the rest of the creators in this book is honor to me. So I'm very proud to join you all. And yeah, I mean, yeah, as far as the artwork goes, it's just like it was a very concise script, and there was never any moments of hesitation of like I'm not sure what Sonny wanted or what he was trying to represent. It was all very clear, and when that comes across your desk, it's just it makes your job easier. So very happy to collaborate with you, Sonny. That was a great short story to work on.
Thanks.
Fantastic. It's so nice to hear about the relationship between the two of you working on it, as well as how you made the story. We'll move on, but I did want to mention that if anyone in the audience has a question, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll keep an eye on it. And after everyone's presented, we'll go through the questions. So let's go on to our next speaker. And we have David Robertson. Is Natasha here? Do we know? Okay, so I'm sure David can hold his own, speaking about the chapter Peggy. You're on, David.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Canada. Thanks, Catherine. Catherine is by now an old friend of mine. We've been working together for 12 years, I think, or more. So she's someone who's very dear to me. And I was very honored to be involved in this project. I think early on, Catherine and Katharina and I, it was part of our conversations where we were talking about Canada 150 and dreaming up a project like this. And then of course, so many incredible people were involved after that in the development of what became this place. And Nigan was one of the big drivers, and he's another old friend, a very dear friend of mine. And I just, I think before I talk about Peggy, I should just say that we have a collection of some pretty incredible Indigenous artists and Indigenous writers in this comic, in this anthology, and we should be reading Indigenous writers and supporting Indigenous artists' work. And we have a lot to say, and we haven't had the chance to say it in the past. So I just wanted to say that comics is a good medium for us to talk. So Peggy is obviously a story about Frances Peggy Mcgabo, who was a First Nations soldier, an Anishinaabe soldier, born in what is known as Parry Sound, I think, but it was Wasauksing First Nation. And I've been doing a lot of work in researching Indigenous soldiers in the war, in the Canadian military and in different wars. And I wrote The Scout before this, about Tommy Prince. I wrote about John Shylack, who was a soldier out of Newfoundland, Labrador, out of Rigolet, who died in the World War. And so I've been increasingly interested in telling stories of First Nation soldiers who went to war for this country because of their incredible skill and bravery, and also because I think it is a platform, a foundation to talk about how this country treated them afterwards and during. And so, Peggy is a soldier that is one of the most decorated, I think the most decorated First Nation soldiers in Canadian history. If I can remember some of his awards, I think he was awarded the military medal while fighting at the Second Battle of Ypres. Sean will be able to tell me if I pronounced that properly. He's a historian. He earned his first bar to the military medal at the Passchendaele, second bar as well, the British War Medal, the Victory Medal, the 1914-15 Star, might be more, but and I bring this up because he was, I think he was also one of the most effective snipers in world history. And so he was in charge of protecting men. Like he saved lives. He was going out to battle and was relied upon to save lives. And he was actually somebody who became in his unit a leader, who people began to adopt practices that he had incorporated to protect himself, like chewing on the cedar sticks, I think, was one of the things he did. And people started doing that because he was so effective as a soldier. And so you have this man who did all these incredible things, and even, I think it's important to mention after the war, he was a very important Indigenous leader in this country as well, that we now call Canada. And so you have a man who did all of these incredible things and then was not given the consideration to own horses after the war, for example. So you have someone who was one of the probably the most effective soldiers in the World War I for this country. One of the most decorated soldiers in the World War I, in charge of people's lives. And then he comes home and the Indian agent wouldn't approve for him to own horses. So he apparently, wasn't qualified to take care of an animal's life, but he qualified to save human lives. And I find that an important discussion point where the Soldiers Settlement Act wasn't afforded to him, for example, and because he was First Nations, that was the only reason. And so I think one of the things I wanted people to think about when they read the story was about what an incredible human being Francis Peggy Mcgabo was, but also why we continue to treat Indigenous people as lower class citizens, and I think really just spend some time reflecting on that. People like Tommy Prince, Francis Peggy Mcgabo, who did things for this country that help make this country what it is now, and then were forgotten and pushed to the side when they came home. And I just think that it's an example of some of the systems in place in this country that have historically broken down First Nations people. And I want people to think about what has been done and what can be done in the future to change the way things are, and the way things continue to be. And so I don't mean to get heavy, but I think that when you think about someone like this and how he was treated, I think it's and because it's not an isolated incident, it's pretty gross. And I think it's a microcosm of Canada 150, where Indigenous people were forgotten in that celebration, where we spent billions of dollars on fireworks, and we couldn't give communities clean drinking water. I think, I don't know. I mean, I'm sorry for going on a tangent, but we are in a first world country here, and we've created systems which have placed people in third world conditions even today. And I think that we should not forget things like that. And I think this anthology, this comic, hopefully helps people to realize and to mobilize to help change the climate of this country and how we treat marginalized people. And I'm proud to be a part of it. And I was proud to work with Natasha Donovan, who's an incredibly talented Métis artist who I've done a lot of work with. And it was really an honor to be a part of it and to work with all these amazing creators.
Thank you so much, David. I think we have a comment in the chat from a high school student who said she liked the Peggy story. And I'm not going to tell you which ones my students like the best in front of all of you, but I will say that my students really find Peggy powerful, and it does make them want to do something in the present, which I think is one of the goals of this anthology. So thank you for sharing that. Natasha isn't here, but she is the illustrator of Peggy and also of Red Clouds, which is another one that my students love, I think because it has a kind of supernatural element, and my students are all really into Gothic and horror, and they just love this story. She was here earlier in the day, and I think she had a question about drawing the spirits in Red Clouds. So if that has been recorded, I think people could go back at some point and see Natasha talk about that. I'm looking at you, Sean. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to Rosie, and illustrated by GMB Gregory Kamichak. Now, do you want to put up your own slides at this point? You're muted.
Yes, I would love to put up my own slides if I could.
Go ahead.
Okay, if you see a scary skull, then I know it's working. Is that what you see? Okay, here we go. Well, I just wanted to open by saying, telling you a little bit about who I am and what I do, and that will lead us right into Rosie in due course. I am a person who has always drawn, always written, always made stories, way back to my earliest memories. And I've progressed in that way, but the tools haven't changed that much. When I'm working on a story, I'm either writing it or I'm illustrating it, or I'm writing and illustrating it. And different stories require different amounts of words or pictures. And sometimes it's taking an idea and bringing it all the way to a conclusion. And sometimes it's listening to somebody else and putting your own ideas aside and bringing their voice forward. And I'm very proud to say that Rosie was more of that second one. I tend to work with things that are a little bit weird, a little bit strange. The monsters I tend to put in my work are imaginary, metaphorical. The work spans all kinds of topics, from the heartwarming to the blood-curdling. But what they all have in common is that I love the way that I can use layers to get at meaning. And the way that pictures, when they're layered together, create one of David's favorite words, a juxtaposition, a way of creating meaning that was undiscoverable before the two arrived together. What I tend to do, though, is work on works that are very steeped in fantasy. And when I started working with Highwater Press, I started working with David on a book called Will I See? And it brings up this particular point, that for me, there's a very real difference in creating works of expression that are based on a lived experience than on a fictional one. And when Dave and I were working together on Will I See, I started to really realize that not everything scary is made up, and not every story is an escape. And that while I tended to work on things that brought on flights of fancy, what he was doing was making works that had change at their heart and motivation, how to change people's thoughts and feelings about things. And I was very, very excited when Catherine came up to me one day and said, I was actually at a comic convention, and she came over and she said, we're putting in a proposal for a book that there is no way they will let us make, but if they let us make it, I think you would be good to work on it. Would you be willing to be a part of this, if it was even possible that people would let us take a shot at an alternate version of history? And of course I said yes. I had no idea what it would lead to or how it would work. And I think it's important to bring up, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit because I want to introduce who are my guides here. Sean and Rachel were the writers of this story. I was a visitor into this Inuk world of what was essentially a weaponized bureaucracy coming to sort and organize a people that didn't work that way. And as I looked through the script, which is one of the most beautifully written scripts that I've, had the privilege of working on in a long time, I kept asking questions like this. We would get on a satellite phone call and I would say things like, okay, Sean, or okay, Rachel, right? What part is the metaphor and what part is real and what part am I supposed to show? And they really let me understand that I was looking at stories from a very specific point of view, and that if I would let go of that, we could find some really specific meaning. So they asked me to do things like draw a soul. They asked me to do things like show what happens when that soul is under assault. What happens when you have an object that represents an idea that defends you, a thing you hold and you hold dear. They asked me to show horror in great depth and also kindness in equal degree. And I found it to be a very challenging project to work on with them. I think it's important to make a point here too, is that as a non-Indigenous person, I'm on two sides of my family. They come from Iceland and from Belarus, both diasporic people that often had to leave their places of origin. And I talk to my kids about this a great deal, about the way that the stories we tell, you have to be careful with the stories you tell, because the stories you tell are also telling you. And this book was a book about that, about the way that Sean and Rachel were showing all the pieces that were trying to be taken away, trying to be stripped away in the way that only our bureaucracy can. I think something that really struck me about this in trying to figure out, how to draw a soul and how to think about representing it on paper, is the idea that the bureaucracy that was coming in and giving people these discs and these names and these numbers, it's the opposite of storytelling. A bureaucracy is a dismantling of understanding in favor of category. And I had approached this story at the beginning trying to put it into a category, trying to put it into a way of telling comic book stories. And Sean and Rachel really guided me, reminded me not to be this guy with the pipe who has it all figured out and can try to pack it all into the end of his pipe and then light it on fire and smoke it. But instead to be someone who sees the place we start is different from the place we are. And that's very different than the place we're going. And this place was a really powerful project to be a part of as a visitor to this type of storytelling and this way of thinking about stories. And I just I can't say often enough how proud I am to have been included and to be invited.
Thank you so much. And thanks for sharing your illustrations with us as well. I'll just ask you to take it down. Thank you. And I will put my slides back up. As we move on to the next presenter and the next story in the book, which is Mckay, and we have Gregory Kamichak, one of the organizers of today's fabulous event, here to tell us about that story.
Yes, Ani, everyone. Hi. Thank you for being here. And I'll just tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm Gregory Kamichak. I'm from the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation on the Saugeen Peninsula in Ontario. I am a writer, the publisher at Kegedonce Press, and I am an assistant professor at the University of Toronto Scarborough in the English department, teaching creative writing, Indigenous literatures, and oral traditions. And I'm the author of Mckay. My involvement started by somebody contacting me, I can't recall who, and inviting me to participate in this project, which was the realization of a dream that I'd had for a long time to create a graphic novel, but I'd never taken the time and space to do that. And so I'm really appreciative to Highwater for giving me that nudge and asking me to take part in this amazing project. When I first proposed a story, it took me a while to think of what I wanted to do, and I came up with a story, and it overlapped with someone else's story. So I was asked to go back and rethink it, which I did. And I'm really glad that that happened, because this was a story that I wasn't sure that I was ready to tell. I had been researching and doing work in the area of residential schools, as well as the 60 scoops and subsequent scoops by the Children's Aid Society of Indigenous Children from our families and communities. And that idea of the taking of our children by the Children's Aid Societies is something that I sat with for a very long time. I think there were a few things that kind of lodged themselves in my heart and soul in hearing these stories. And when I got this opportunity, I finally realized that this was the story that I wanted to tell, and that I thought suited graphic novel form in the best possible way, because there were aspects of it that I knew would be told in a more meaningful, more profound and moving way through the use of the visual images and iconography. And so I have to say, though, I had not ever written a graphic novel. I'd written many other things. And so I really have to thank Alison Koistra, who was the editor who worked with me on Mckay. She really helped me to understand the form, how to use it. I had all kinds of ideas. And of course, I was coming at it from a very writerly point of view. And so she taught me and helped me to let the images speak, to give them space and room to tell the story as well. And that was a really wonderful process to go through. And she just helped me with a lot of just learning the form and understanding the form, and talking through different aspects of the visual part of the story, which was incredibly helpful to me as I was doing this, because it was a very emotional story for me to write, and to work through. So I have to thank the two artists who were involved in co-creating this graphic novel with me. Ryan Howe did the illustrations that are kind of telling the main part of the story. And Jen Storm, who is the writer of Red Clouds, another one of the stories in the This Place collection, came on board to illustrate the pencil crayon drawings of the main character Mckay. So you can see even on the screen that we're looking at that there's a kind of a notepad, a drawing pad, and a figure of a thunderbird that looks like it's drawn in pencil crayon. And so I really have to thank Jen for kind of trying to get inside my head and figure out what those images should look like. You can see other images on the wall of Mckay's house when she's speaking with her daughter, image of her mother, and Ryan for working so hard to really take these ideas that I had. I actually did just a tremendous amount of research on everything to do with this story and the time period. So the haircuts, the clothing, the colors of everything from, if there's a tractor in the front yard, I researched the tractor, I researched the colors, I researched every aspect that I could of the visuals of this, so that it would be, it would ring true as a depiction of that time and that place, and the reality of what these children were facing when they were taken from their families and their communities and forced into the so-called child welfare system. I think, I also would be remiss if I didn't also thank Raven Sinclair, who is a professor, and she's doing research on the taking of Indigenous children. And she was generous in speaking with me about some aspects of the story, and she reviewed the script when it was completed. And one of the things that she picked up on and that I wanted to make sure was very obvious in the story were the moments of love and kinship and connection that happen within the story. This story of just wrenching children apart from their families and all of those kinship connections that they have, that even within that, there are moments, which you can see one of them in this on screen, where the Nimki's mother, when she's a child, hugs her and wraps herself around her. And so I wanted to make sure that sort of in each generation, in each relationship, there were these moments of connection, these moments of kinship, these moments that said that despite all of this loss, all of this pain, everything that happened, that there were people who found their way and who reached out to create that which had been taken away from them. And while still acknowledging that there were many, many other children who were not able to do that, who did not survive the assault of the Children's Aid Society and the government on our families and on our children. So Raven Sinclair, she picked up on that, and she asked for kind of one more moment between the mother and daughter near the end. And it was the exact right thing to suggest. And so we included that. And I think it was really important that we did, and that we showed. I'm really moving away these days from using the term resilient, because the way I feel lately is that I'm really very over this idea that Indigenous people should be praised for being resilient, and kind of moving the focus off the violence that forces us to be resilient. I don't want to be praised for being resilient. I want to be taken out of situations where I'm forced to be resilient. And the people who are resilient only represent a small portion of the people who go through these experiences and aren't able to survive them in various kinds of ways, and who are changed in dramatic ways by them. So I'm kind of starting to move away from using that term, although it's challenging to find another term to replace it. But I wanted to show how Indigenous communities continue to hold on to, and Indigenous families and Indigenous individuals hold on to what they can. And so the last scene in this story, not to really give any spoilers, but the last scene in the splash page at the end of this story is based on an actual event at Wabaseemoong First Nation, where they took a stand against the taking of children, because there were hardly any children remaining in their community. And the schools were becoming empty. So when I read that, and it's not a part of history that we're taught. I saw a reference to it in a newspaper doing other kinds of research. And I thought, why do we not know this? We should know this. We should know what happened to that community, and we should know what they did to protect themselves and to protect their children and to protect their futures. And so that became the one of the inspirations for Nimki, for this story. And yeah, I'm not sure if Donovan, if you wanted to add to the conversation about Nimki, but I know that you're here, and I believe you did the colors for it.
That's correct. Although, look, Gregory's stolen my thunder there.
I have to apologize. I must have got that wrong. I just think Greg does everything, right?
I did not make that slide. I want to make that very clear. Donovan, Did the
Don-
colors on this book. And Donovan is an amazing colorist. Please tell them all about it.
Oh,
Donovan,
my.
would you like to put up your slides?
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Awesome.
Let's see if I can figure that out. There's a, it's share screen, right? That's what I'd be doing. Oh, host disabled participant screen sharing.
We need to make you a co-host.
There we go. Oh my. Getting promoted already from having not colored this book briefly and giving it to Greg. And now,
Sean, I think, okay, there you go. Yeah.
there we go. My name is Donovan Yashik. It's also pronounced Yasyuk, Yasyuk. There's tons of different pronunciations. I apologize to everyone who I've been giving wrong pronunciations to over the years. I'm on Treaty 1 territory here in Winnipeg, and if I had a massage therapist, I could probably somersault to the street named after Sergeant Tommy Prince. It's 4 houses away from me. But at 45 years old, that type of activity is heavily discouraged. But I'm not Indigenous, similar to Gregory, but you know, I'm very proud to be invited to participate in this book, and you know, it's just an absolutely wonderful, challenging experience. It's been great. I do have some pages of Ryan Howe and Jen Storm's art, and you know, after Kateri's wonderful speech, it almost feels trite to just talk about sort of some of the technical aspects of the art and whatnot, but
Actually, that was so important, you know, and getting those colors right for Mckay's drawings. So I'm definitely interested. I've never had the chance to really speak to you about it since it came out.
no, that's right. We've not met. We've chatted only through email, so this is nice. Okay, so in a process like this, and so I colored, boy, I think 4 stories in this book, and Scott Ford, who the poor guy, I tell him he's a genius every time I see him, and I'm correct. Did a whole bunch of others, you know, for those artists that didn't color their own stuff, and we have very different styles. I think Kyle Charles was talking about Scott Ford, who's got, you know, he just approaches things completely differently, and I maybe I don't know, I don't know how to describe it. Maybe tend towards more real colors. But here's a scene from Mckay that would have just been the line art that I would have gotten, received from Ryan. My next step would basically to add in some flat colors just to block out, you know, the skin tones and you know, what sorts of things the skies are going to be. And then finally at the end, I would go in, just give me one more second here, and add a bit of modeling and stuff. So suddenly I'm adding shading and light. You can see that Mckay's, most of this, yeah, this figure here is completely in shadow with a little bit of the sunlight glinting off the side, and hopefully darker, trying to pop her in from the foreground, from the background. And then finally I add sort of a bit of a sunset to further cut her out of that image. And it's one of those things where a lot of people think colors is just, you know, horses are brown, and so you make the horse brown, and how hard can that be? But you know, color, every colorist, Scott Ford would have colored this completely differently, with a different approach, and you know, would emphasize maybe different story elements. And in some ways, what, you know, I try to accomplish with something like this, I put a glow for that sunset in there. It's meant to look a little ominous. If you read the story, I won't spoil it, but I also enjoy how it sort of cuts her out of that background, and, you know, uses color to separate her from her surroundings. You know, she shouldn't really be there. She doesn't belong there if you read the story. And, you know, Kateri, if I'm paraphrasing anything incorrectly, please feel free to jump in. But that's sort of some of that process where, you know, you can see how panels would change from just black and white to color. Other story elements that I, you know, sort of try to come in is this home really is a warm, safe place, in my opinion. That's how I interpret it. So lots of warm colors compared to, you know, some of the more ominous dark blue, colder skies. And just tried to make it as if it was this sun-filled, you know, warm, safe space. Moving on, just one final minute now. So you can see here, what have I got here? So this, Ryan Howe did sort of the main story elements, and Jen Storm drew the sketchbook scenes. So I would have basically started coloring this by giving it a, you know, sort of a sketchbook colored background. And then, you know, it's meant to be colored in crayon or pencil crayon and whatnot. So whereas with Ryan's stuff, I'm, you know, coloring full shapes and you know, haha, staying within the lines. When it comes time to do some of the drawings, you know, there was quite a few liberties taken here. And then I'm also going in and adding, excuse me, little bits of texture over top of that to sort of give it that pencil crayon look. And yeah, so that's sort of the difference in how each of those images were treated. And in the house, Jen Storm's drawings, you know, are meant to look like pencil crayons, and they're hanging throughout this whole scene on the wall. You know, I've worked with Ryan on a number of projects in the past, well, and Jen as well, and it was a nice challenge to come together to work on this book. There we go. I can hand off if anyone's got questions. We end. It's up to
Sure.
the,
If people have questions, please put them in the chat. We've got a couple of great ones coming up. Thanks so much, Donovan. I love seeing the process stuff because I'm not a comics creator. So it's super interesting for me to know that when I'm critiquing it as a scholar, to see what went into it. Thank you so much. I just want to mention.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go first.
I was just going to say, I take it for granted. I mean, I've been doing this for, I don't want to say how many years, but like since last century, really. And I take for granted some of the magic that can happen through that process, you know, on occasion. And sometimes when I go to schools and will demonstrate this, it's interesting to see the reactions, because a lot of times, I mean, the color, good colorist is like book design in some ways. You almost shouldn't notice them. They should complement the story, but not overshadow it, right? So, yeah, if I'm doing my job correctly, you would hopefully not even know I'm involved. So,
and I'd just like to take this moment to thank you so much for doing that that pencil crayon effect, because I kind of pushed a bit for it, and then I was just so happy to see the results. It was just done so well. So I really appreciated the work that went into that.
And another interesting thing just to bring up that, you know, again, not being Indigenous, like, you know, we're all learning things every day, but me more than others. We had to go back and forth a number of times because, and I know David and I are working on a book together right now. We're talking about this, but in terms of skin tones and getting a variety of, you know, you just, sometimes as a colorist, you just get in that zone, and things you should be thinking of, you're not. And, you know, it has to be pointed out. And as soon as I remember getting an email from you, and it was just like, oh, wow. I mean, that's just, you know, I won't paraphrase what you said, but it was really powerful about, you know, the power of, well, I'll try to paraphrase it. You might do it better, but you know, the power that representing different skin tones is. And as soon as you say it, it's completely obvious. But, you know, sometimes when you're in the zone and working, it's things that have to be pointed out to someone who, you know, doesn't have to deal with the repercussions of that on a minutely basis. I don't know, you know, so that was a great exercise, and I'm very thankful to have gone through it.
Thanks so much. It was great to work with someone who was really listening, and you know, and just taking all of that and coming up with something that just looks so amazing. So You
I've
guys,
been
thanks
married
for
twice, so I've learned to be a good listener.
that. Well, it's working.
Anyway, thank you so much
Thanks.
again for
Thanks,
having
Donovan.
me and for having me in this discussion. It's a huge honor.
We're not done yet. We have 3 stories left. We're going to go till about 7:15, and then we'll have time for questions. But I just want to say, listening to all of you, the love you have for each other and the respect for the work, it shows on the page, right? I think that's one thing that makes this book. It's just such a high quality book, and the production is in there, and you can feel the love and respect of everyone who is involved. So it just radiates off the page, but it's so nice to hear you talk to each other and express that. So thank you. We do have 3 stories left. I want to show you that I corrected my slide so that I removed Greg's false credit and got Donovan in there. The next story that we're going to talk about or hear from is Mcgabo. We Remember It. Written by Brandon Mitchell, and we also have Tara Odbert here. And Donovan, were you the colorist on this?
I was, yeah.
Okay, all right.
This was terrifying.
So I'll ask Brandon to speak, and then maybe Tara.
Hi, hey, Donovan, nice to meet you, finally.
That's right.
I think you were the missing trifecta of the book. All I got was an email saying, colors are being handled by somebody else. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's great to finally meet you. I'll make a recommendation. We should do something like we should all try and find a way to get together and do some more stuff like this. It was just great to see everybody. I'm having my own little contest too. If you guys can name all the characters I have in my background, then you guys win a prize. I don't know what it is yet, but we'll figure out. David can't participate though. He's not allowed to guess. So thank you very much. My name is Brandon Mitchell. I'm Mi'kmaq. I'm from Listuguj First Nation, Peace and Friendship Territory. And I'm currently residing here in Fredericton, Woostagoic Territory. That is also part of the Wabanaki Confederacy. So they are also Peace and Friendship Treaty Territory. So I do feel like I'm home. Doesn't I don't know if you guys feel this, but when you're in your own territory, you just know, and there's just a level of comfort there. You know, we moved back here about 6 years ago, and it was already like, it just felt like, even though I wasn't home, I know that I'm home. So yeah, I was really fortunate to receive an email from Laura, and you know, it was one of those things where you know, to be asked and to be invited to participate in this, it was a real honor. And I also want to share the importance of having a working email, or making sure that your emails don't get buried or be sent as spam, because Laura actually got a hold of me back in 2015 for something through my website, and I replied, and nothing happened. So I was like, oh, okay, whatever, no big deal. Following year, I get another email from her, and I replied. I was like, this sounds. I remember this name, and I replied back, and you know, she wanted to know more about my work and samples of my stuff. I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. Nothing, crickets. So I was like, fine, no big deal. And it was through my LinkedIn, but this time there was more firm in her tone, and I could just kind of tell, like, it was just like, are you Brandon? Like, I could just hear her slapping the keys. And I was like, yeah, I am. I'm Brandon. And are you the creator? And have you done this stuff? Like, yes, that's me. Would you like to take a meeting? Are you available to take a meeting? And I was just like, yeah, sure, no problem. And look at that. You know what? This chair has been sinking on me. As you guys can see, I'm like, why is he shrinking? It is, yeah. Don't forget to tip your waiters, folks. And so we had a phone call, and she proposed this idea. And I was just like, I knew right away what I wanted to write about, and I was, I didn't have first pick, but I just said, I knew what I wanted to write about. And she was just like, okay, well, you know, it was almost like it's like Justice League. I'm forming a team. And she was like the Ben Affleck of the group, and I was just like, yeah, no, I'm all for it. And then when we all got together and we all started talking about it over the phone, I was super excited. Like, pinch me. I can't believe it. This is amazing. And I was fortunate enough to also get the era or be able to tell the story that I wanted to tell. I had two backup stories, but this is the one that I really wanted to focus on. So Mcgabo is about the salmon raids that happened in Listigouche back in 1981, June 11th. I was actually focusing more on the first raid. There was actually 2 raids that year. So it was June 11th and then June 21st. And the whole purpose of this was I was already kind of like a lot of the things I was already writing about were there was kind of like a piece missing, and I wanted to always write about our treaties. More so when I realized that I was doing a workshop here in St. Mary's, and we were talking. I just mentioned treaties, and the kids just kind of had this blank look in their eyes. I said, "Well, you guys were in peace and friendship territory," and they didn't know what that was. And I was like, "Oh, okay, all right." So I had to go and do my teacherly thing and find some resources and put something together and try and explain everything. And this wasn't just with the Indigenous students, but this was also non-Indigenous students. So I was fortunate enough to be in an environment where I was working with both. But they both had questions. So I just did my best to do my research and try and provide some context and some visuals for it. So that was kind of like the seed for this story. And another seed that was planted in this story was when I was in Ottawa. Every time that I used to meet people that were like older than me, they would always ask, everyone would always ask, "Well, where are you from?" First of all, they would say like, "Well, Mitchell, you must be Mohawk." I was like, "No, I'm not that kind of Mitchell. I'm the Mitchell I'm the Atlantic Mitchell." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And then, "Where are you from?" And I was like, "Well, I'm from Listigouche." And everybody, I swear to you, everybody would say to me, "Oh yeah, I was there in '81. I was there in '81." So these are all people that were just like, "Wow, really? Okay." Growing up, like my experience with the raids were my parents left, so they actually we left for Boston, and my dad was working as an iron worker up over there. It was almost one of those things where they kind of, I think they got a feeling that something was happening, so they were just like, "We're out of here." So I missed it. But I remember growing up, when we moved back, I would hear a lot of vibrant stories about it. So, like my grandmother would talk about it. Everyone in my immediate family would be talking about it. And I'd be this 5 or 6 years old and be like, just sitting there, like listening, like, "Oh my God, wow." As time went on, nobody was talking about it as much, or they weren't talking about it with the same exuberance, or not so much exuberance, but like talking like that fire that was there. And time kept on going on, and it it's one of those things that just started turning into whispers, and I was just like, "Oh, okay." I would say around like it was around 2001 where they started like celebrating it again some more, but those stories weren't as vibrant as they were. And that's why I love this graphic novel. Like, I love graphic novel medium because it puts the visuals, like it's reframing it, and it's words are very powerful, but images to go along with those words are even I feel like Ralph Wiggum, more powerful. More. So so that was my pitch. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to reinvigorate. I wanted an opportunity to reinvigorate our community, and just reinvigorate those who, if it was already turning into whispers in our community, then I knew it was turning into whispers in the larger part of Canada. Especially, like I said, the people that were telling me that, like, "Oh yeah, I was there in '81." Those people were getting older, so I needed to find a way to preserve it, or not so much preserve it, but like showcase it again. So that was my pitch. I wanted to write about the raids. So that was approved. I was excited, super pumped. And I think I was too excited because I was like, "Okay, now what? Like, I don't know, like, what do I write about?" And so I was just kind of like, I got so excited to the point where the writer block really hit hard. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how to start the story. And so I was talking to my wife, and a lot of things that I do is a lot of collaboration with my family. And she was just like, "You should talk to my mother." She was there, in 81. And I was like, okay, perfect, great. So I sit down with her and I was telling her, it's like, yeah, I got this opportunity to write a graphic novel story. And she was like, oh, okay, cool, great. Like, just not impressed. And I was like, no, well, I actually want to write about the raids. And then she just lit up. She was just like, oh, okay. And then she just started talking and said, and then she was like, I still remember her pointing her finger at me. You have to, like, everyone just seems to be like very like at me. I'm like, well, do I give off that vibe? Anyway, she was just like, you have to write about the first raids. And I was like, well, that's the idea. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write about the first raids, thinking that I was writing about June 11th. And so she's talking about June. She's telling her story. And I was like, this doesn't sound like June 11th. So I started writing it, and I put my dates down, and I was like, I got my first draft done. Here's the story, and she's reading it, and not even like 2 pages in, like, this is wrong. Like, oh, thanks. It's like, you have to write about the first raids. I was like, that's what I did. And she was like, no, you didn't. And that's when I started like doing more, not so much doing more research, but in my research, and I was trying to dig deeper into what she was talking about. There were previous raids in other previous years. So this, like, June 11th was or 81 was like the boiling point, like the final straw in terms of standing up for our rights. So previous years, the SQ would come in and destroy our nets every summer, and basically they, enough was enough. But every time that they came in, we were able to get them off of our land peacefully, but not without any, like, we never received anything in return. Like, they take the catch and they destroy the nets and they just leave. So I was just like, oh, okay. So there, and even like when I did my research, it was always just one line or one sentence. If you and the other thing I didn't want to retread was Alain's Bumsway's documentary. But even in Alain's documentary, it was always just one line, like previous raids. And then if you do the research, when I started digging deeper into the research on this, it was always summed up as previous raids. So I was like, you have all these like papers written by non-Indigenous people talking about something that's pretty significant in our community, and not just in our community, but across Canada. Like the impacts that happened in Listigouche, it echoed across Canada. Fighting for our treaty rights. And so what happened was, oh my God, it always happens. I kind of lose my train of thought. I'll get it.
Brandon, sorry,
yeah.
I have to do my job and just ask you to wrap it up a little bit so we can hear from a few other people. It's super interesting though. I feel bad cutting you off.
No worries. Thank you very much. Because I'll just keep on going. But anyways, like I said, the foundation of the story was talking to people that experienced it firsthand, and then trying to showcase that. And I'm going to lead right into Tara, because what happened was I had another opportunity after the story was finally approved. They were just they said, do you have an artist that you want to work with? And I was just like, I didn't even like hesitate. And I was like, Tara, because we've had experience working together, and the only thing I was hoping that she was available. And I will take it away to Tara.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. When you contacted me, well, I guess my name's Tara Odbert. I am a multidisciplinary artist. My main kind of art is animation, and I'm doing like a TV show for kids for APTN right now. And I was teaching animation actually when Brandon got a hold of me, but we had done a bunch of comics before, just because basically I think my main MO is to kind of bring Indigenous culture into current digital media and kind of blend that and mix that together. And comics is a great way to bring these messages to a younger generation and to kids. And I think that's the best way that changes are going to happen. So it's very important to me to work on things like this. And we had done comics before. And when he approached me with this, he sent the story to me, and I read through, and I had no idea that this even had happened. Like I had no idea about the incident in Restigouche, the film, or any of this. Any of this had happened. And when I called him back up, I was like, dude, well, first it made me cry just reading it. And then when I called him up, I was like, dude, did you make this up? Like, what is going on? Like, this story is crazy. And then he was like, no. Well, he's like, yes, I did make up the story, but it's based on true, like something that really happened. And I was like, that is insane. And the fact that it happened in my lifetime, I was just like, this is just insane. And that I never knew about it. My family never talked about it until after I brought this up. And they're like, oh yeah, oh that, yeah, everybody was there, and blah, blah. And I'm like, well, you never talked about it. You never said anything about this. Wow. And it was kind of really important for me, I guess, to bring this into this kind of format so that more people could learn about it and know about it so that it wouldn't happen again. And lo and behold, you know, just recently in Nova Scotia, the same exact thing happening with the lobster fishermen in Mi'kmaq. So it's like, it's insane. And I think that these stories are, it's so important that they be told, and kind of be told in a way that is accessible to kids so that it doesn't happen again in the next generation, sort of thing. For the main part, I wanted to make sure that, you know, we were accurate when I was doing the drawings and illustrations, because it is an actual event that happened, and there were actual people that, you know, kind of making caricatures of, but not taking directly their images and things like that. So we had to be kind of very careful of that, and that also that we weren't copying, or that I wasn't copying the incident at Restigouche, like in terms of that, but just taking it as sort of inspiration and putting things in there. And I think also one of the things that I liked about working with, or that I always like about working with Brandon, is that even in these kind of dire times with Indigenous people, there's always like this humor to everything, that, which is very odd, but like even at a funeral, what you're going to find is like more people are just laughing about things. And that's kind of like a way that we deal with such serious issues and all the serious things that have happened. And I think that's one of the ways that we have survived, I think. And part of what Brandon does is to incorporate that into the comics. And I thought that that was just very endearing. And I hope that part of my illustration would lend to that, so that we are telling the story, but it's not all just having to bring us down. There is a little bit of humor in there because of like just the way our people are, like. And I think that's one of the most amazing things and amazing parts about it. The main part about this story, I guess, for me, and the reason why I wanted to work on it, and like, as Brandon said, comics isn't my main MO, but it's something that I thought was very important to work on. But in this particular story, it just shows the power that people have when they come together. The government felt they had to send in military force for like one reserve. Like it blows my mind that they thought unarmed people needed military force to come in to make sure that they were behaving. Like, that's crazy. But the fact that they're like driving them off with you know, pitchforks and shovels and things like that, like, that's amazing. And it just shows to me that the absolute power, I guess, that our people have when they stand together and to do these things. It's amazing to me, an amazing story. And I did feel very, very privileged to be able to work on it.
Thank you so much. And it makes sense then that we go into our next and final speaker, because I feel the two stories by Brandon and Tara and by Nigan and the team, which is Andrew Lodwick, they're almost companion stories, I feel, in terms of resistance and fighting back and activism. So Nigan, you're our final speaker. I was also hoping someone, i.e. you, would just mention Chelsea Vowels' story, because it's so different from the other ones. And I have a slide for that. But why don't we hand it over to you and you tell us about your story, Warrior Nation.
Yeah, I'm going to be brief because I want to do a few things that are sort of just talking about the book overall. And when we first came up with the idea for the book, and there was a number of meetings, and I was part of, I think, all of them, I think, but the conversation of how do we get this book to Retail Canada? And what we did is we came up with the idea to divide it up basically in, we wanted 10 stories. We had enough funding to fund at least 10 stories. And so of approximately, 15, 20 pages or so. Some are longer, some are shorter. And there are 15 years apiece. And so each writer got 15 years. And so we've sort of seen a chronology this evening. And we can't forget, of course, Katerina Vermette's Annie of Red River story, which we didn't get a chance to talk a lot about tonight. But it's a remarkable story about, Louis Riel gets the lion's share of attention during that time period in the Red River settlement. But, Annie of Red River was a real mover and shaker in the building of that community. And also, it really is an indicator of the strength of Métis women. And that's a really remarkable story. Check that out. I think Scott Henderson illustrated that, if I remember right. So Scott's also a really amazing illustrator. Check him out as well. But 15 years along the way is different ways people told those stories. Jen Storm, for example, talks about kind of one event in her story, Red Clouds. Other people speak about kind of a series of events in terms of a theme. Kateri's story comes to mind. Some people are talking about a real geographical space as well as a historical time involving world events. I'm thinking about Rachel and Sean's story with Gregory Kamichak. But my story was, I worked very hard to cover all 15 years, trying to cover all my bases. And these were the most formative years of my life as a young Anishinaabe person here on Treaty 1. It really begins with the most formative moment of my life, which is the Oka. The situation at Oka, the armed resistance at Oka versus the Canadian military and the Security of Quebec. And it talks, the opening pages are about the invasion and the lies that were told to the community at Oka, who were simply occupying the territories in which their ancestors were buried in the pines and being attacked and assaulted during a ceremony. And so, the most amazing thing happened during this anthology for me during the creation of this story, in that I got to work with Ellen Gabriel, who is just an honor. And if you know Ellen was the spokesperson at Oka for the community. And I mean, she directly gave me photographs to work with that were behind the lines that Andrew then created into illustrations, which, what a remarkable gift. These are never before seen images that she gave to us in order to create as a result of the images. And we also got a number of things wrong when we did the first draft. So Andrew was incredibly patient. This is his very first graphic story, and he was incredibly patient to rework some of the images to make sure that we got everything correct. And we happened to have a person behind the lines at Oka to correct those images, make sure that we got everything proper. For instance, one of the things that was talked about was who was carrying the guns. And so if you look in the story, you can see who is carrying guns and who was not, and who is the ones doing the work inside the community, who is not. Some really interesting kind of interactions that are within that story. But this is a story really about my own growth and about my own life. And the story is really about Washok and the kind of experience that Washok takes place over the 15 years, and begins with not only Oka, but Elijah Harper's No, which was something I witnessed as a young 14-year-old Anishinaabe. And I got to recreate Elijah Harper and give this gift to his family. So I got the chance to go and visit with Elijah's family and give him the gift of the book. I mean, what an honor, and to be able to represent Elijah just opened up a real possibility for me. And then covers basically 15 years. Ippawash covers all the different struggles, which culminates, in the various things that happened after Oka, as well as it refers to back in the activism in the 70s, which is really where the resistance of the warriors at Oka and Ellen Gabriel comes from. And so it talks about the activism in the 1970s all the way up until the Kelowna Accord in 2005, where Washok, fictionally, it kind of starts with me wearing Belle Biv DeVoe t-shirts, having lines drawn in my head. And then it ends with a fictional rendition of talking about Washok being a part of the Kelowna negotiations. And if you look right here, my favorite, I actually can't see my cursor, but if you look on the very last page, the top left-hand corner is just on the very top left-hand corner, that's Richard Wagamese. I directly wanted Richard Wagamese in this story because this was my homage to Richard Wagamese, who was, of course, a journalist during that time in Alberta, and as an Anishinaabe uncle, was the person who supported me in the work of becoming a writer. He was somebody who believed in me, and alongside Brunelda Wheeler was just a remarkable person who believed in me and supported me, and up until his death. And so I wish well in my uncle and the beautiful work that he did. So I talk about different elements. This story is really in many ways an homage, but it's also an honoring of all these people who have made this experience of 15 years, which were some of the most formative of my life, talking about not just my own experience, but the experience of activism, which leads into Chelsea Vowels' story. So Chelsea Vowels' story, which is the one following this, which is Kittis Canal, 2350, is a beautiful story told by a Métis writer, incredible writer of the book Indigenous Rights. And I believe this is her first graphic story. And it's a story about the future. And it's a story about Cree people who have inhabited their territories for thousands and thousands of years, since time immemorial. But non-native people have left the earth, and they are now coming back. And it's what the Cree community is doing to prepare for having gone through the struggles, of course, of colonization and having non-native people leave the earth. What is it like to re-inherit those relationships? And what is it that needs to take place as a result? And I know, Donovan, you were a big part of this. And now that I've seen your kind of way of working, and it makes me appreciate those Northern Lights like incredibly well, because what a beautiful coloring job that you did. And Tara, what an honor it is to meet you, because I can tell you that I know Canada is not going to tell you what your students would really favor and really like, but I can tell you that your illustrations are so loved by the people, both young and old. I've worked with kids in grade 6, 7 on stories, on this particular story. And then I've also worked with people at university, and constantly people are talking about this story and the illustrations that are within this story, because it's in many ways kind of a science fiction, but it's also reality. And it's also, there's a really beautiful scene involving a shaking tent in this story, which I think is just really beautiful and remarkable. And the way that you're able to represent traditional ceremonies in really ethical ways. And Chelsea was on a panel here that Ken brought in to present at the University of Winnipeg One Book Series. And Chelsea gave this beautiful story about how she came up with the images of the shaking tent. And so I'll leave that for her to tell whenever she's had a chance to be on the panel, probably the CBC podcast that will be coming out of this book. But I also want to say that, one thing about this book that was really beautiful is it wasn't just a commemoration and an honoring, but it was a birthing of other stories. And we've heard all these different authors talk about how they've made connections. Many of you are meeting tonight for the first time, but I also want to just give a tip of my hat to this book right here, which is a really wonderful, was created as out of the One Book series because of this place, being something that all students were going to read at the University of Winnipeg. This small book, small comic book called How Comics Work, was put together by Candida and Brandon Christopher, who's a professor at the University of Winnipeg, but it was illustrated by a first-time illustrator, Alice R.L., who is a Ojibwe illustrator who's doing really remarkable, amazing stuff, and that because of this book, other books were formed as a result. And I just think that that's a really beautiful thing that represents what this place is supposed to be all about, which is not just a talking about the things that we've experienced, but also things that are yet to come. And so, miigwech, and I'll pass it back to Candida.
Thank you so much. You packed a lot in there. We're going to have a lot of questions, I think, about that. I'm just going to take down my screen. We're formally scheduled to go until 8 o'clock, but we did want to end a bit earlier than that. I know there are a couple of questions, and I'm going to go straight to one that I think a lot of people will be wondering, and it's a question for everyone involved, because I think there will be different answers from each of the teams that work together. And it was from, I think, Jennifer Shannon. I'm just scrolling up to find it. It was from Jennifer Shannon, and she wants to know, what does the story look like when it's sent to an artist? Is it in paragraph prose, sketches, into panels or layout, or something else? And I suspect there are going to be a few different answers here. So I will leave it to you to jump in and let us know, either artists what you get or writers what you give.
The shortest answer, I think, is yes. It's all those things, and it depends very much on the writer.
Okay, so there's no standard.
People claim there's one, but the ones that work best are usually when the writer and the illustrator can figure out how best to communicate their idea. And there is no perfect way to do that.
There's really two styles in terms of the creation. I mean, there's lots of different styles, of course, and there's no one way to do anything, but there's two sort of contemporary styles. There's the DC style, which is like really micro, panel by panel. This is what happens in each panel. And then there's the Marvel version, which is kind of a large, broad spectrum strokes of what's happening on the page. And I think in this group, having known and been involved with the creation of the book and seen many of the scripts, everyone worked kind of differently. Like David Robertson, who will be admittedly to tell you that it's very important, the detail, very small details, controlling all of those small details. Whereas another person, like myself, for example, I'm just a very broad stroke, and I'm hoping that Andrew will be able to make some of those small detail decisions for me in collaboration with me. So what I did was with Andrew is I just sent him a ton of pictures, and I said, this is what I'm looking for. So, I mean, it's different forms for everybody.
What helps too, I guess, is like I said, when I picked Tara, or when I had an opportunity to work with Tara, we've already worked together, and I studied. We both went to school together at the MBCC Miramichi. So we both have a diploma in animation. So I studied script writing in an animation format, or writing in a script writing format, and it was really great because, like I said, like I didn't have to think too hard, or I didn't have to go into a lot of detail. It was one of those things where whatever I wrote, I completely trusted her. And I was like, here's my stuff, make it pretty. And she did.
So as other people are answering, I'm curious to know if you decide on this beforehand or if it just kind of happens organically. Maybe Sunny, can you tell us how you and Kyle work together?
Yeah, well, I just wrote the story as a short story, and then I sent it in to the editors, and then they placed it in script format. And I kind of went back over that and kind of fleshed that out. So I think it was more so like Niguan was saying, you know, kind of like the more panel by panel thing, where I was actually describing a lot of things that was happening in each little square, and then just kind of pass it off to Kyle, and he worked his magic and brought that to life. And I think what was interesting about working with Kyle on this is that I think we just, you know, I had stuff, here's my stuff, and he said, well, here's the stuff that I made in response to it. And I was like, great, this is cool. And it was just like a really kind of mutual respect. And it was a really gracious collaboration where I didn't feel like there was a lot of like back and forth and changing things. I think for maybe on Kyle's end, it was like, hey, am I doing this right? Am I representing this right? You know, and I would just send some pictures and some, you know, examples for what I was talking about. And it turned out to be a really wonderful experience.
Yeah, when you have a script that's, I find that where the most static comes from is like, if you have an incomplete script or an incomplete thought when writing, and you leave a lot of things open, and there's not a lot of closure in terms of what you need to see out of the script, then it kind of goes like, well, I can't guess what you have in your head. You have to absolutely have to provide me with the, you know, what's the theme? What is the most important piece of information that you need to get across? And then I'll take that and try to put as much visual flavor into it. Like the opening spread, like it wasn't written like that. It was just like, you know, here's all the information for that page. But I just felt like, you know, well, we can be advantageous with this opener to draw people in. And so, you know, I started breaking panel boards and stuff like that, and try to keep it clean enough that you could follow what was going on without getting too experimental. Because Sunny, you know, the story is very important, and it's important that we get the information right. So yeah, when you have a script that's just like very clean, concise, to the point, and gives you all the detail that you need, there isn't a lot of need for back and forth if you're good at building visual narratives and characterizing, you know, people in the story and stuff like that. So yeah, there wasn't a ton. It was just, you know, pretty much as somebody said, you know, like if I need a little bit more clarity on the visual here, like what do you see in your head? Like what are the facts of that story? Then you just pass that along. And same with working with Scott too. We had the one phone conversation and just kind of talked about Alex Toth and you know, an animated style and just like how our approach is going to be. And then, you know, Scott did what he did on it and made it amazing. So it was a very easy, clean process.
Thanks. I think David wants to speak, and then maybe Tara. Is that right? And then we will move on. So David, do you want to speak to this?
No, Nigon's right. I'm a very anal script writer. I'm like, I'll write like everything down to like where someone's elbow was positioned in like on the table of a dining room table. I mean, I have a very specific vision for how I want scripts, how I want comics to look. I'm a very visual writer, but at the same time, I think I've done it long enough now where I can let my ego go, and when illustrators have better ideas for the story than I do, I can give up some of that vision, understanding that the illustrator, as much as a storyteller, is the writer in a comic. I think Greg and I have a good example of that in Will I See. I sent him a very detailed script for Will I See, and Greg has a very particular Gothic style to his work with a lot of layers, and the script that I wrote is kind of a hybrid between his style and mine, and so I can also, work in a more organic kind of process. But I prefer to have a lot more control over the comic, in how it's laid out, even, and where the panels are, what the gutters look like, and everything. So
I have just next to my desk a script of David's for a short story that we're working on. I'm just kidding, but one thing about David, this is actually a 70-page book that we're working on. So, but I mean, I go through that script then, and with his details, anything that requires a specific color, as I read, it's like, okay, he's got Northern Lights. I highlight that so that when I get to that page, so from a colorist point of view, it's better to get that early than after you've colored the page. Anyway, and I think I butted in front of Tara at this point. So I just wanted to crack a fun poke at David there. And, I appreciate the long scripts. I really do.
Tara, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I had since I worked with two different writers, I had actually two different experiences. And also, I guess, in terms of the content of each of the scripts as well were different. So like with Brandon's, it was, very real. Like this is, happening. And he actually went and took pictures for me. And like, I kind of like, we try to like make them kind of go back so that stuff was like more in the 80s and things like that. But it was like really real locations, and trying to make sure that everything was correct in terms of where things were. With Kintaskina 2350, Chelsea had a great script, but since it was in the future, there's a lot of things it's just made up, and that was a really great opportunity for me to be able to make up a lot of things and add those in there. So probably a lot of things I don't even think I told her any of this stuff, but I used like a city in the Yukon for the back city there, and it's actually the cityscape, and then I added in futuristic buildings in there as if the past had been torn down and that the future was created afterwards. And one of the things that I added that I think Chelsea liked a lot was that I just was kind of thinking in the future, what's going to happen with and this kind of wasn't in the script, so it was great for me to be able to add some of my own ideas to it. So when she goes back in the past and time travels into the past, all of her community are saying goodbye, and that was in the script that they're all saying goodbye. But I thought, well, they're probably going to make some sort of cool sign to say goodbye in the future, and what might that be? And then I just kind of like had the idea that they would say like, "I love you" with like in ASL, and then that would just be, and everyone's just kind of doing that to say goodbye to her, and that hopefully that she'll come back, sort of thing. So it was very cool to experience both of those kind of scripts.
Wow, that's a great detail. Thanks for sharing that. We're going to have two more questions, I think, and there's one that's in the chat. It's from Linda. Can you elaborate on ethical representation of ceremony or spiritual aspects? And I know that in the recording of that panel Nigan mentioned with Chelsea, she talks about the Cree shaking tent, but there are other elements that are ceremonial or spiritual in some of your stories. So can you speak to the ethics of representing them, or more broadly representing real people, real events?
I can talk in a very humble way about that in terms of my own story. So when I was drawing the images, like drawing it out in my head about the images behind Oka, it was just remarkable to me because all the different ceremonies that took place. First of all, I didn't really realize how many ceremonies had taken place behind the lines. I was sort of imagining that all of this was focused on the blockade at Oka. And then Ellen kept saying, it was the most ceremonial place, probably the most traditional place that she'd ever been a part of at that time, because language classes were taking place while people had submachine guns literally 100 feet away. And it was just so it's a pretty remarkable kind of moment to think about ceremony. But when we did the original images of that ceremony, the real critical part was to get the who was doing what right. And when we first did the script, Andrew and I worked on it. I don't remember putting a gender in there. I might have, but I basically said, this is what's happening. There's a smudging ceremony. So when Andrew drew it, it was he thought a medicine man carrying the smudge and bringing it to various people. And so what Ellen quickly informed us was that there were no men on the inside of the blockade because they were too busy standing on the outside of it and standing in the protective measures there because the women were leading all of the ceremonies on the so we had to make a scene of all women on the inside. And it was really a really interesting moment for us because what it did is it reminded us of how important it was to think in terms of what was happening within the space and what was happening in terms of what the community protocols were. And so then that's why the photographs were so important to us, showing authenticity.
Thanks so much for that. Does anyone else want to address this in their work?
I would just say that for a lot of my work, because I've done a lot of historical graphic novels, whether historical fiction or historical nonfiction, and I've done all of them at Highwater. And typically we'll have like an academic and cultural advisor. So we run these things through people who are way smarter than I am, who will let us know when we're being inaccurate, when we need to make revisions, things we can and can't do. Even I think with Peggy, we also worked with like Wagamese Rice, who is from Wissahickon, and he also gave the script a once over and looked it over for us and let us know if we were being accurate in terms of the depiction of the community and from what he understood of the life of which a lot of Francis Peg Mcgabo. And so we worked with I think 3 different people with that script to make sure that we were doing things appropriately and accurately. And so I think it's just from book to book. I've been lucky enough to be able to work with people who will be able to vet elements of the book that need to be vetted to ensure that we're being respectful and accurate.
Thanks for that, David. Sunny, would you like to say something?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was addressing stories of my great grandfather that were told to me by my grandmother and other family members, and he's made a very big appearance in a lot of my work in general. And I'm just I'm a visual artist. I'm not really a comic book artist or a writer or a comic writer or anything like that. I'm just a regular old artist who does all these things. But in terms of working with the community, I did want to be respectful, and I approached a couple people within the community to get feedback on to make sure that I wasn't going to be depicting anything that could be seen as or taken in the wrong light, not necessarily offensive, but I didn't want to show anything that might be sacred to the community. And generally, a lot of the story that I was talking about didn't really touch on any of those sacred ceremonies anyways. What I found interesting was just how to incorporate community knowledge into the story. And when I brought my ideas and a rough draft of the story to a friend and community member, Brody Naknakam, he was really thrilled that this story was being shared of our community. And he was really excited for the future to see how that could pan out, to talk about, you know, possibilities in the future about how we could tell our stories from a very authentic place. And so having people with authentic voices was the best way to, for me anyways, to make my story go forward.
Great, thank you. I think we will wrap up with the last question, which is a really interesting one, given that this is really a day where we're starting a conversation and thinking about where it can go. And we have a question from someone who is a teacher in Los Angeles and wants to know what you think about Indigenous solidarities between the Canada and the US, given that this book is so much focused on Canada as a nation. So I wonder if we can close on your thoughts, maybe specifically in relation to comics and the border between Canada and the US, and whether that means anything for you as Indigenous artists, or what solidarities you might be able to see between the Canada and the US in Indigenous comics or more broadly. I know that's kind of a big question to throw at you, but anyone want to take a stab at it? Thanks, Tara.
Yeah.
I just from my own personal experience, I guess it's kind of funny and weird, but I actually do a lot of work as an Indigenous artist for people in the States, and I'm currently illustrating a book for HarperCollins. But I think there's a lot of collaboration that's going on. I can't speak so much to the political things because I think both here and in the United States, there's so much persecution going on that I think that the only thing we can do is kind of stand together and support each other in all of these aspects for sure. But absolutely, I think that there is a huge collaboration going on in terms of between Canada and the United States, and I do a lot of work down there too. So very accepting of our Canadian Indigenous art.
Awesome, thanks. Sunny?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, roughly the same thing. It's just, you know, we have shared histories. Colonization has been going on for a hell of a long time. And whether, you know, we're up here in Canada or down in the United States, we share this oppression, we share this dislocation, we share this removal of identity and culture. And you know, when I travel, or when I did travel around to talk about my work, especially in the States, I always started off feeling a bit weird, like with this very strong Canada focus. But what I come to realize is that they know and they experience the exact same thing. So when I talk specifically about issues that happen in Canada, people can relate to it down in the States. Native American, our cousins and stuff down there. So we share a lot of the same history, and I think we gain a benefit when we stand in solidarity with each other in terms of Indigenous nations, but also when we stand in solidarity with our guests that are living here now, especially what's going on south of the border with the unfortunate incidences with the Asian American women being murdered and the Black Americans being murdered. I think we all benefit to stand in solidarity with these people.
Thanks, Sunny. I think that's a really powerful and poignant way to end what's been a fantastic conversation. You know, I've been working on this book and with students on it for 2 years, and I got so many new things to take back to them about the process and the intentions and the collaborations. And it's just, it's been really eye-opening for me and also really fun. So thank you so much for all of the work that you have done and for the long day that many of you have put in today and bringing your energy and your enthusiasm, which is really infectious, I think. So I know that there were people that I know from outside Canada here tonight, and I hope that on that note about solidarities, this place will go beyond our borders as well. At this point, I'd just like to thank everyone, thank the organizers, and I'm going to throw it back to Nigan and Kateri to close the event.
Just another kudos to Kathy Gerbasi, who's over there, who turned her camera back on. You just wonderful to, you know, you are a big part of bringing this all together. And of course, I remember Annalee as well, and Annalee, all the hard work that she put into this book. So the publishers at Highwater Press and Kathy, of course, now taking the helm of that. I mean, what a remarkable gift it is that be able to bring us all together. And check out the CBC podcast that's coming out about this. Each one of us will be involved in certain ways within that podcast. And, you know, such an honor to meet all of you tonight. Some of you I'm meeting for the very first time on these little boxes on my screen. You know, people who I've only seen on pages, and I've taught your work, but it's really nice to see everybody. So miigwech everybody for coming out. We want to just end off by I'm going to bring in the organizers of the Indigenous Comics Symposium. We've got Sean right here. We've got Kateri, which is over here, and there's Lucas over here. So some of you may have not seen Lucas, but you would have seen him hosting the session this afternoon on Marvel Comics, indigenizing Marvel Comics. So Lucas has been working really hard behind the scenes all night, and Sean has been working, you know, Sean said that he's going to melt into a puddle of stress. I think that's what you said earlier, because Sean's been really the safety net for this whole session. So a huge miigwech to Sean and Lucas, who we didn't hear a lot from tonight, but for all the hard work that you've done. A huge miigwech to my colleague and collaborator who first came up with this idea and phoned me. I don't even remember when you phoned me, Kateri. Was it like September or something?
I think it was in September, yeah.
And I was like, why the heck is Kateri phoning me? Did I do, you know, what did I do? And you kept phoning, and I was like, what's going on? And then next thing you know, all of this came into this, and you know, you really birthed out this idea. We're going to get you to finish off. But, you know, on behalf of myself and behalf of the Department of Native Studies, which Sean and I are a big part of, as well as the University of Manitoba Institute for the Humanities Graphic Novels Cluster, a huge miigwech to everybody for a beautiful, remarkable day. And our partners, Highwater Press, Kegedonce Press, for coming to and helping us bring this forward. All of the sessions will be available on the University of Manitoba Native Studies Facebook page. We are also talking about perhaps putting it on YouTube, because not everybody's on Facebook. So we are thinking about locating it in such a way that we can include all the sessions for people. And for those of you who participated in tonight, our department admin in Native Studies will be in contact with you to issue you a gift from us for participating. And just so that if we close off here at the end and we don't get a chance to mention that, expect an email which will need some information from you on where to mail some stuff. So huge miigwech and thank you, and I'm going to hand it over to Kateri to help us end the inaugural Indigenous Comics Symposium.
Thank you. Thanks, Nigan. I wanted to make sure that we thanked everyone and acknowledged everyone who should be acknowledged at this point. And hopefully I don't miss anyone. But I did want to say that really this all came about because I'm an assistant prof at UTSC, University of Toronto at Scarborough, and something came across my desk about some funding, and I sent a really brief idea to the chair of my department, Neil Ten-Kortner, and proposed this idea of an Indigenous graphic novel symposium, it was at the time. And he said, that doesn't fit the parameters of this funding, but I love the idea, so let's do it. And so I really have to thank him, because honestly, if he hadn't said yes immediately, I would have probably dropped the idea for a few years and just, you know, worked on other things. So I'm really grateful to UTSC for just jumping on board with this right away. And then I immediately thought, when he said yes, I thought, okay, I have to call Nigan. And, you know, he's been doing so much work in this area. So I called him, and I was persistent, and he finally picked up the phone and quit trying to hide from me. And he brought Sean and Lucas into the fold to work on this. And I just want to really thank all three of them for taking that on and working together, sharing ideas and co-creating what this symposium became today. So I thank you for that. I wanted to say that was also with the support of Catherine at Highwater and the support of Kegedonce Press, as well as the many, many presenters who've been here throughout the day. And I can't say enough how grateful I am, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of the organizing committee and UTSC to say that you just shared so honestly and generously of your time and experience, your creative vision, your dreams and your ideas. There's so much abundance to drive us forward for future conversations. And so I really thank you for doing that for us and for this community that we're creating here. I wanted to thank Amber at U of M and Sonia, Professor Sonia Nicola at UTSC, for creating some of the promotional material, and Patricia Campbell at Kegedonce Press and Kirsten Phillips at Highwater for promoting and helping on that side of things. That was all really appreciated and took a lot of those pieces of work away from us. So thank you. I want to thank all of you who are here tonight, everyone who came through today, all of the readers, the students, the teachers, the creators, the people who just had an interest, who got excited by the idea of it. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for sharing your questions and your ideas and your thoughts with us. You know, I think it's fair enough to say this is the first Indigenous Comics Symposium, because it feels like it's certainly not going to be the last. So Chimigwech to all of you, very much appreciated. Take care, everyone. Miigwech.